I broke the padlock and my scream echoed through the house. My son, my only son, was tied to a chair in the dark. His lips cracked, his wrists raw, his voice barely a whisper, "Mom." Emmy did this. She said she needed money. For 12 days he was left in that basement, starving, freezing, praying I'd come home. And the one who did it wasn't a stranger. It was the little girl I once held in my arms, my granddaughter. Before I tell you what I did when I found out, please like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from so every parent who's ever trusted too much can hear what betrayal really looks like. You think you know betrayal? You think you understand what it means to have your heart ripped from your chest by someone you'd die for? Let me tell you something: nothing, and I mean nothing, prepares you for the moment you realize the person you raised, the person you loved more than your own breath, has become a monster wearing the face of family. 2 weeks. 2 weeks I was in Cuba, holding my husband's hand in a sterile hospital room, watching machines breathe for him while I whispered prayers into the Cuban night. 2 weeks of sleeping in plastic chairs, of drinking bitter coffee that tasted like desperation, of calling home every night to hear Emmy's sweet voice telling me, "Don't worry, Grandma. I'm taking care of everything. Uncle Danny is fine. Focus on Grandpa." Those words. God, those words haunt me now. I'm taking care of everything. She was taking care of everything, all right. Taking care to steal everything we had. Taking care to destroy the one person who needed protection the most. Taking care to plan our family's destruction with the precision of a surgeon and the heart of a predator. I should have known something was wrong when my husband stabilized and I called to give them the good news. The phone rang and rang. No answer. I told myself Emmy was probably at school. Daniel was probably sleeping off his pain medication. He'd been recovering from a back injury. That's why Emmy was staying with him in the first place. That's why I trusted her to be his caregiver while I was gone. Trust. What a beautiful, poisonous word. Trust is what kills you softly, slowly, until you're gasping for air in your own home. The flight back felt endless. Every bump of turbulence reminded me of my husband's fragile condition. Every delay made my chest tighter. But underneath it all was this gnawing feeling, this sick intuition that something was rotting in my life while I wasn't looking. You know that feeling when you wake up from a nightmare and you can't remember the details, but the terror clings to your skin like smoke? That's what those 12 hours in the air felt like. I remember walking up to my front door, fumbling with keys that suddenly felt foreign in my hands. The house was dark. Not just evening dark, but abandoned dark. The kind of darkness that swallows sound and spits out echoes of your own fear. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Stale air, like the house had been holding its breath for days. The refrigerator was humming too loud, working too hard, and when I opened it, warmth spilled out instead of cold. The milk was curdled. Vegetables had turned to mush. Food I'd bought fresh before leaving was now rotting in Tupperware containers that looked like science experiments gone wrong. But it was the silence that really terrified me. Houses have their own language, you know? The way floorboards whisper under familiar feet, the way pipes sing their little songs, the way families fill space just by existing. This house was mute. This house was holding secrets. I called out for Daniel, for Emmy. My voice echoed back mockingly empty. I climbed the stairs, checking bedrooms that felt like abandoned movie sets. Daniel's bed was unmade, but not slept in unmade. It was tossed around unmade, like someone had been searching through it. Emmy's room was pristine. Too pristine. Like she'd cleaned it to erase evidence. Something in my gut knew I wasn't coming home to peace. That's when I heard it. Faint, almost like the house settling, but rhythmic. Deliberate. A sound that made my blood turn to ice water because it sounded like someone trying to make noise with a mouth that barely worked anymore. The basement. The sound was coming from the basement. I'd lived in this house for 37 years. I knew every creak, every groan, every whisper of wind through the windows. This sound didn't belong. This sound was wrong, wrong, wrong. My feet carried me to the basement door before my brain caught up. The door that should have been unlocked. The door that had a padlock hanging from it like a steel accusation. A padlock I'd never seen before, securing a door that had never been locked in all my years of living here. My hands started shaking so violently I dropped my keys twice. The sound from below was getting weaker, more desperate. It was a pattern: thump, rest, thump, thump, rest. Like Morse code spelled in desperation. I ran to the garage, grabbed the crowbar my husband used for home projects, and I became someone I'd never been before. I became a woman breaking into her own house to save someone she loved. The metal bit into the wood frame with a scream that matched the one building in my throat. When that lock finally gave way, when the door swung open and the basement light flickered on, I saw something that broke every understanding I had of what family meant. My son. My 34-year-old son who'd survived losing his wife to cancer, who'd fought through months of physical therapy, who'd trusted his own daughter to care for him. He was tied to a chair in the center of our basement, slumped forward like a broken doll. His face. Oh God, his face. Gaunt doesn't begin to describe it. His cheekbones jutted out like they were trying to escape his skin. His eyes had sunk so deep into his skull that they looked like bruises. His lips were split and bleeding, so dry they looked like cracked leather. But it was his wrists that made me understand the depth of this horror. Raw. Red. Infected. The rope had bitten so deep it had left permanent grooves in his flesh. He'd been tied up for so long that his body had started to merge with his restraints. When he heard my footsteps, he looked up, and the sound that came from his throat wasn't words. It was the whisper of a man who'd been calling for help until his voice gave out, who'd been praying for rescue until prayer became just breathing, just surviving one more minute, one more hour, one more day. Mom. The word fell from his lips like a confession, like an apology, like a prayer finally answered. And then he said the words that shattered my world. Emmy. She said she needed money. For you. For me. She told him she was stealing from us, torturing him, destroying our family for me. She made him complicit in his own destruction by making him believe it was love. I fell to my knees beside that chair, my hands shaking so hard I could barely untie the ropes. And while I freed my son from 12 days of hell, he whispered the story in fragments, in broken sentences punctuated by sobs that came from both of us. She'd come to him 3 days after I left for Cuba. Sweet Emmy, devoted Emmy, with her bright smile and her helpful hands. She told him she'd been talking to her boyfriend, that they'd found a way to help with Grandpa's medical bills. All she needed was access to the family accounts, to the safe, to the documents we kept locked away for emergencies. Daniel was weak from his injury, trusting because she was family, grateful because she'd been so caring. He gave her the combinations. He signed where she told him to sign. He believed her when she said it was temporary, when she said I'd asked her to handle things while I was gone. But greed is a living thing, and it had been eating at Emmy for months. It wasn't enough to take what she'd asked for. She needed more. More money, more access, more time to drain us completely. And Daniel, sweet Daniel, who still believed in the goodness of his daughter, started asking questions. That's when she bought the rope. She told him it was just until she could figure things out. Just until she could make everything right. She brought him food for the first few days, water, even a blanket. She told him she was protecting him from something, from someone who might hurt him if they knew what she was doing. But the food visits became less frequent. The water came in smaller portions. The blanket disappeared. And Emmy's visits went from reassuring to angry to desperate to cruel. By day 7, she was only coming down to tell him to be quiet. By day 9, she wasn't coming down at all. By day 12, when I found him, he'd been alone in the dark for 3 days straight, tied to that chair, listening to his daughter pack up everything valuable in our house while he slowly died of thirst. I called 911 with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, with a voice that cracked like glass every time I tried to speak. The paramedics who came looked at Daniel and then at me with eyes full of questions they were afraid to ask. How does a grandson end up tied in a basement? How does a family destroy itself from the inside out? They loaded Daniel onto a stretcher while police officers spread through my house like ants on a picnic. They photographed everything: the rope burns on his wrists, the chair where he'd been held prisoner, the basement that had become his tomb. They documented the missing items, the empty safe, the forged signatures on bank documents Emmy had left scattered on the kitchen table like confessions written in greed. Detective Morrison, a woman with gray hair and tired eyes, sat across from me at my own kitchen table and asked the question that made everything real. Who else has a key to this house? Only Emmy, I whispered, and saying her name felt like swallowing poison. Only my granddaughter. That's when they found the note, tucked under a magnet on our refrigerator like a grocery list of betrayal. Don't worry, Grandpa. I'll take care of everything. Love, Emmy. Love. She signed it with love. The detective's investigation unfolded like a horror story written in bank statements and email threads. Emmy hadn't just stolen from us randomly. She'd been planning this for months. She'd met someone. Some boy who filled her head with dreams of easy money and escape from our boring family life. Together, they'd researched cryptocurrency, offshore accounts, identity theft techniques. She'd been studying how to destroy us like it was a college course. The emails between Emmy and her boyfriend read like a manual for family destruction. She keeps too much cash in that safe, Emmy had written. Grandma will never notice if I take some while she's gone. Uncle Danny trusts me completely. He'll sign anything if I tell him it's for Grandpa's medical bills. Once I get enough, we can disappear. Start over somewhere else. Forget all this family drama. Family drama. That's what she called our love for her. Drama. But the worst email, the one that made Detective Morrison's hands shake when she read it to me, was sent just 2 days before I came home. He's asking too many questions. Wants to call Grandma. I can't let him ruin this now. Don't worry, I know how to keep him quiet. Grandma will understand when she sees how much money we saved for Grandpa. She thought I'd thank her. She genuinely believed that if she stole enough, if she destroyed Daniel completely enough, I'd forgive everything because of the money. She thought love could be bought and paid for with our own stolen wealth. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't hold the coffee Detective Morrison brought me. The mug fell to the floor and shattered, just like everything else in my life. Just like my trust, my faith, my belief that family meant something sacred. But Emmy wasn't done destroying us yet. When they traced her movements through airport surveillance, when they found her at the international terminal with a suitcase full of our belongings and a one-way ticket to a country with no extradition treaty, she wasn't alone. Her boyfriend was there, the same boy who'd helped her plan our destruction, counting money that still had my husband's fingerprints on it. The arrest footage still plays in my nightmares. Emmy, my beautiful granddaughter with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin, fighting the handcuffs like a wild animal. Screaming that she'd done nothing wrong, that she was just trying to help, that we'd understand if we really loved her. But it was the interrogation video that showed me who she'd really become. Sitting in that sterile room with her lawyer beside her, Emmy wasn't the girl I'd raised. She was a stranger wearing my granddaughter's face. No tears, no remorse, no recognition of the pain she'd caused. When Detective Morrison asked her about Daniel's condition, about the 12 days of torture, Emmy shrugged. Actually shrugged. He's fine, she said. It was just temporary. A misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. 12 days of hell, and she called it a misunderstanding. The detective played the recorded phone call Emmy had made to her boyfriend from jail. Don't worry about the old man, her voice said, clear and cold as winter glass. She'll forget about all this once she realizes how much money we got. It's better this way. They were holding me back anyway. They were holding her back. The family who loved her, who'd sacrificed for her, who'd trusted her with our lives and our home. We were holding her back from becoming a thief and a torturer. That's when something inside me died. Something that had been keeping me soft, keeping me hopeful, keeping me foolishly optimistic about human nature. It withered and turned to ash in my chest, and what grew in its place was cold and hard and unforgiving. I realized, sitting in that police station at 2 a.m. while my son fought for his life in a hospital bed, that love isn't always returned. That trust isn't always honored. That family isn't always sacred. And that sometimes, the people who hurt us most are the ones we'd die to protect. The trial was a circus of lawyers and reporters and curious strangers who treated our family's destruction like entertainment. Emmy sat in the defendant's chair wearing a dress I'd bought her for Christmas, her hair styled the way I'd taught her, her hands folded like the little girl who used to help me bake cookies. But when she stood to speak, when the judge gave her the opportunity to show remorse or ask forgiveness, she looked directly at me and said, "I'm not sorry for trying to secure our family's future. I'm sorry they can't see that I was trying to help. Trying to help. By tying her father to a chair and leaving him to die." The prosecutor read the charges like a prayer for justice: unlawful confinement, elder abuse, fraud, identity theft, attempted murder. Each word hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't look away. I couldn't look away. I needed to see her face when the truth was spoken out loud. Emmy's defense tried to paint her as a misguided child, influenced by her older boyfriend, confused by grief over her mother's death, overwhelmed by family financial pressures. They brought up her good grades, her volunteer work at the animal shelter, her plans for college. They made her sound like a victim of circumstances rather than the architect of our destruction. But the evidence spoke louder than their excuses. Bank records showing systematic theft over 4 months. Video surveillance of Emmy forging documents. Audio recordings of her laughing with her boyfriend about how easy it was to manipulate her family. And most damning of all, Daniel's testimony from his hospital bed, delivered via video link because he was still too weak to appear in person. My son, my broken son, told the court how his own daughter had looked him in the eyes while tying the ropes, how she'd promised it was temporary, how she'd asked him to trust her one more time. His voice cracked when he described the moment he realized she wasn't coming back, when the basement went dark and stayed dark, when hope turned to despair and despair turned to acceptance that he might die in that chair. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. 3 hours to decide whether a granddaughter who tortures her own family deserves punishment or pity. Guilty on all counts. Emmy's face when they read the verdict was blank, emotionless, like she was hearing weather report instead of the destruction of her own life. But when the judge sentenced her to 8 years in prison, when he ordered restitution for the stolen money and damages for the emotional trauma, when he called her actions a betrayal of the most fundamental bonds of family trust, she finally cried. Not tears of remorse. Tears of anger. Tears of a child who couldn't understand why her selfishness had consequences. I watched her being led away in shackles, this girl I'd once rocked to sleep, this child I'd taught to ride a bicycle and braid her hair and say her prayers. I watched her disappear behind steel doors and concrete walls, and I felt nothing. No sadness, no relief, no satisfaction. Just emptiness where love used to live. Daniel recovered, physically at least. The doctors said he'd regain most of his strength, that the rope burns would heal, that his weight would return to normal. But they couldn't fix what Emmy had broken inside him. He won't say her name. He won't look at her pictures. He moved out of our house because he can't bear to see the basement where she left him to die. Some betrayals cut so deep they sever more than trust. They sever the ability to believe in goodness, in safety, in the possibility that love means protection rather than vulnerability. We sold the house. Too many ghosts, too many echoes of her voice promising to take care of everything. Daniel found an apartment across town, close to his therapist, far from the basement that still holds his nightmares. I moved in with my sister, but sleep doesn't come easily anymore. Every night, when darkness falls and the world gets quiet, I hear that sound again. The rhythmic thumping of my son calling for help while his daughter counted stolen money upstairs. I hear his voice whispering, "Mom," like a prayer, like an accusation, like a question I'll never be able to answer. How did we raise someone capable of such cruelty? The money was never recovered. Emmy and her boyfriend had moved it through so many accounts, so many cryptocurrencies, so many offshore holdings that even the FBI couldn't track it all. Our life savings, my husband's medical fund, Daniel's disability payments, all of it vanished into the digital ether like it never existed. But the money isn't what keeps me awake. It's the knowledge that I failed to see the monster growing in my own family. It's the understanding that love can be weaponized by those who understand how much you're willing to sacrifice for them. It's the realization that trust, once broken by family, doesn't heal like other wounds. Emmy writes letters from prison. They come every few weeks, addressed in her careful handwriting that still looks like the little girl practicing her cursive at my kitchen table. I don't open them anymore. Daniel begged me to stop reading them, stop torturing myself with her attempts to rewrite history, to make herself the victim of circumstances rather than the architect of our destruction. But I kept the first one. I keep it as a reminder, as a warning, as evidence of how thoroughly someone can destroy everything while still believing they're the hero of their own story. Dear Grandma, it began. I hope you understand now that I was trying to help. The money would have been enough to pay for Grandpa's treatment and Uncle Danny's recovery. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I love you both so much. Please forgive me. Please don't let this destroy our family. Love always, Emmy. Love always. She signed it "Love always" after what she did to us. That's when I understood the truth about family, about blood, about the bonds we think are unbreakable. They can be broken. They can be shattered so completely that the pieces draw blood when you try to put them back together. And sometimes, the people who break them are the ones you'd die to protect. I visit Daniel twice a week now. We sit in his living room, drinking coffee that tastes like forgiveness, talking about everything except the basement, except Emmy, except the 12 days that changed us forever. We're learning how to be a family again, but we're smaller now. Damaged. Cautious in ways we never were before. He started dating someone, a kind woman who works with trauma survivors. She understands why he checks locks obsessively, why he can't sleep in rooms without windows, why he panics if he can't reach his phone. She doesn't ask about Emmy, doesn't push him to forgive or forget or heal faster than his soul allows. Some betrayals require rebuilding yourself from the foundation up. My husband recovered from his surgery and came home to a family he barely recognized. We told him everything, showed him the evidence, helped him understand how close we came to losing Daniel forever. He aged 10 years in 10 minutes, but he's stronger now too. More aware of the fragility of the things we take for granted. We don't talk about Emmy at family dinners anymore. We don't save her place at the table or hang her pictures on the refrigerator. We've learned to love the family we have left, the family that chose protection over profit, loyalty over greed, sacrifice over selfishness. But late at night, when the house settles and memories creep in like cold air through cracks, I still hear that sound. The desperate tapping of someone calling for help while the person who should have been helping counted money upstairs. I hear my son's voice whispering "Mom," like a prayer, like a confession, like a warning I wish I'd heeded before it was too late. Blood made us a family. But faith is what's keeping us alive. I want you to understand something. Anyone listening to this story, anyone who thinks family betrayal is something that happens to other people. It starts small. A borrowed 20 that's never repaid. A lie about where they were last night. A secret they ask you to keep because you're the only one who understands. The warning signs are there, but love makes us blind. Trust makes us stupid. Hope makes us willing to ignore evidence that would convince us to convict a stranger. Emmy didn't become a monster overnight. She became one gradually, choice by choice, lie by lie, until the girl we loved was just a mask worn by someone we'd raised, but never really knew. If you ever trust someone so deeply that you ignore the silence in their eyes, don't. If you ever love someone so blindly that you make excuses for inexcusable behavior, stop. If you ever hope so desperately for someone to be good that you refuse to see their capacity for evil, wake up. Love blindly, and you'll wake up in the dark. Betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from those you called home. It comes from the hands you taught to pray, the hearts you taught to love, the minds you taught to choose right over wrong. It comes from family, and when it does, it doesn't just steal your money or your peace or your safety. It steals your ability to believe that love is protection rather than vulnerability. It steals your faith in the goodness of people you'd die for. It steals your innocence about the depth of cruelty possible in those who share your blood. But here's what I've learned in the months since Emmy was sentenced, in the endless nights of rebuilding trust with the family that remained, in the slow process of learning to love without losing myself. Betrayal by family is the worst kind of theft because it robs you of more than possessions. It robs you of the belief that love is always returned, that sacrifice is always honored, that trust is always sacred. It teaches you that sometimes the people who know exactly how to hurt you most are the ones you taught to love. And yet, somehow, we survive. We rebuild. We learn to love again, but differently. Smarter. With boundaries that protect rather than exclude, with wisdom that guards rather than judges. Daniel is healing. I am healing. Our family is smaller now, scarred now, but maybe stronger for having survived the worst betrayal we could imagine. We've learned that family isn't defined by blood alone, but by choice. The choice to protect rather than exploit, to sacrifice rather than steal, to love rather than destroy. Emmy chose differently. Emmy chose greed over love, money over family, selfishness over sacrifice. She chose to see our trust as weakness rather than gift, our love as opportunity rather than blessing. She made her choice. She'll live with the consequences for the rest of her life, in prison and after, carrying the weight of what she did to the people who loved her most. And we'll live with the consequences too. But we'll live with them together, the survivors of her betrayal, the remnant of our family that chose love over everything else. That's how you heal from family betrayal. Not by forgetting, not by forgiving too quickly, not by pretending it didn't happen. You heal by accepting that some people are capable of unthinkable cruelty, even when they share your blood. Especially when they share your blood. You heal by learning to love the people who choose to love you back, who choose protection over exploitation, who choose sacrifice over selfishness. You heal by understanding that family is not a guarantee of goodness, but a choice to be good to each other, day after day, in ways both small and enormous. And you heal by never, ever forgetting that betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from those you called home.